Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, Russian President Vladimir Putin heads for a landslide win after getting more than 3/4 of the vote. Mr. Putin warns of tough times ahead, though. Will his fresh mandate enable him to fix Russia's economy? And Dante Lam helmed the war blockbuster Operation Red Sea, no small feat for a filmmaker. Dante tells us in a sit-down interview the kind of effort it took to shoot a Navy film done on a grand scale. You're watching World Insight. Vladimir Putin has sealed his victory in Russia's presidential election. With more than 56 million votes, it was Mr. Putin's biggest win and the largest by any post-Soviet Russian leader. The victory will take Putin's dominance of the nation's politics to nearly a quarter of a century, until the year 2024 at least.
Smiles and cheers on the faces of young volunteers at Putin's election campaign headquarters. But the atmosphere wasn't ecstatic at all, most likely because everybody, not just his supporters, expected him to win. And when the Russian president appeared here, he didn't fuel the euphoric fire. Instead, he warned of tough times ahead and emphasized the need for unity regardless of political affiliation. In the next 6 years, he expects a lot of support from his election team too.
I would like our team to be preserved for the next few years, so we can work effectively for the benefit of Russia and in the name of Russia. Thank you very much.
Mr. Putin was re-elected amid unprecedented challenges, given that Russia has been facing rigorous sanctions from Western countries such as the US, Britain, Germany, and France. China's President Xi Jinping has congratulated President Putin on his re-election. Speaking by phone, President Xi said China's ties with Russia are better than ever before, setting an example for building a new type of international relations featuring mutual respect, fairness and justice, cooperation, and win-win results. The expanding cooperation between China and Russia in recent years, including their joint efforts to build large-scale oil and gas cooperation, are meant to develop the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, their BRICS membership, and to pursue China's Belt and Road Initiative with the Eurasian Economic Union. They have improved bilateral ties while facilitating their economic development, contributing to regional and global peace and stability, and bringing tangible benefits to both countries.
So what is the takeaway of the Russian election? Let's turn to our panel. With us here in the Beijing studio, Dmitry Trenin, who is the director of the Carnegie Moscow Center. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you again.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And Alexander Gabriev, a senior fellow and the chair of Russia in the Asia-Pacific program of the Carnegie Moscow Center. Welcome as well.
Pleasure, Tian Wei. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Okay. What is the takeaway from this election? Your response first.
Well, it was an important election in the sense that Mr. Putin's victory in the election was a very solid one.
About
68%. The most important thing is the turnout, not so much the vote for Putin, but the turnout. The turnout was just shy of 70, which was about the objective of the Kremlin. And the vote for Putin was almost 77% of the vote, which means that for the first time in Russian history, the president was elected with the majority of all voters, both voting and abstaining from the vote.
What does it tell us?
It tells you that there is a significant degree of mobilization of the Russian people and the effect of rallying around the flag in the situation of confrontation with the United States has worked to the satisfaction of the Kremlin.
So economy does not matter that much.
Economy indeed doesn't matter that much, though the last 3 years, for the first time under very long Putin's rule, have been pretty tough for the Russian population, and the real disposable income have gone down. But the Russian people were persuaded, or they chose voluntarily, depends on which side of the debate you come from, that to support the leader at times where a foreign power tries to squeeze us hard and to push us into the corner, that you need to be united around the leader. And the Kremlin fully utilized that. And I think that the sanctions had an impact of actually boosting the popularity of Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin regime.
But at the same time, many of the intellectuals, whichever camp they're coming from, are asking about the specific plans for the economic development. Do you think President Putin, as a candidate, and now, once again, into the office, can provide and has provided some of the concrete steps that could eventually, according to you, lead to some results?
Well, Mr. Putin, as president, delivered the State of the Nation address just 17 days before the vote. And it had two parts. The first part talked about his domestic plans, and they were aplenty. And the second part talked about his weapons, new weapons, they were also aplenty. I would say that most people are not spending too much time and not asking too many questions about future economic plans. For most people, the big thing is that things do not get worse than they are today, that somehow we scrape through, that somehow we manage, muddle through, whatever.
Yeah.
The issue is that, in my view, Mr. Putin is about two things as Russia's foremost leader. One is keeping the country in one piece. And two...
So-called united.
Yes. And two, restoring Russia's status worldwide as a great power. Now, President Putin clearly understands the importance of this vote and the mandate, the strong mandate that he has received.
Right.
His focus will not be the economy, although some things will be done on the economic field.
Arguably, what is the meaning of status?
In the pragmatic school of thought, say that a country really gains respect because of its relative economic weight. Russia doesn't do that. We are a commodity-based economy for a variety of reasons, including vested interests around that which prevent us from launching a meaningful structural reform. So Russia is a dwarf in economic terms, though it's pretty sizable. But we definitely have new instruments, including a military tool, which we use to restore our status in international affairs. And it's more about to be perceived as a great power by others and be respected across the board for the tools that you have. So it's punching above the weight economically, but it also can use these military tools, what very few can do, and also have political will to push against the United States.
I'm not sure if that is really the answer. Even from outside Russia, I question about that, because think about the fall of the Berlin Wall, and Russia was in pieces. Well, at the same time, its economy suffered greatly. And as a result, people like President Putin rose in the Russian political scene in a way believed by people to save the country. So I'm not sure whether economy did not matter at all in the Russian politics.
It did, and Putin was very fortunate.
You are saying not anymore?
I think that Putin miraculously managed, and that's his brilliance as a tactician and political operator, to persuade Russia that the benchmark to which you compare your current state of consumption livelihood is 1992, 1993, when the economy was in tatters after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And as long as you don't go there, so if Putin is out of the picture, you immediately go to the beginning of the 90s. And there is a long, long way to go there. So as far as you maintain stability, you can keep up with economic hardships, given that you have this newly discovered pride.
It seems that President Putin, to a certain extent, Mr. Chen, has caught this mentality of the Russian people, that is, they don't want chaos. They don't want to go back to what the early 1990s was like for them, in which they suffer economically, while at the same time they suffer from a scattered around the country, and of course loss of international status. Is that your feeling?
Well, I wonder who prefers chaos. I don't think that there are many people who would prefer chaos over some kind of order. Well, of course, it makes a difference what kind of order you establish in place of chaos. Mm-hmm. But I think that this achievement by President Putin, which dates back to the early 2000s, is something that he has already been credited with. It's his 4th presidential term.
Yes.
He has had 3 elections before that. So I don't think you can ride on that much longer. I don't think that this election was about Putin saving the Russian people from the chaos of the 1990s. It was about Putin, the commander-in-chief, standing up tall against the pressure of the United States and championing Russian interests around Russia and around the world.
You said it wouldn't be long, and yet you've seen that in the previous elections also of President Putin, that he's trying to rally the country and make it successfully. So you're saying it's not be long, but it's being repeated once and again.
No, what I meant that in electoral terms, you cannot refer the electorate to something that to the dragons that you slayed 18 years ago, 16 years ago. Some people would not remember that. So he has to be something else to the people who are voting today. Of course, that's his achievement. That's part of his record. But there's something else to his record, and that something else is his ability to stand tall, be Russia's champion around the world. And that's what counts today.
Gentlemen, interesting. Our conversation has reached to this stage. It cannot reach to a semi-conclusion even, in a way, that the election is not about how Russia is. It's the election about Russia versus, let's just say, the United States. It's a vote about how far the United States has been left behind rather than how advanced Russia is today. Is that what you're trying to say and trying to persuade me?
No. Well, what I'm trying to say is that basically you have a country which finds itself in a position of someone pressured from the outside in a fairly big way. And in that situation, this is not war that we traditionally think of wars, but this is something closest to it.
Why we hear the word war repeatedly so often these days? When we talk about Russia and the West, there seems to be a quote-unquote war going on or something like that. When we talk about China-U.S. trade relations, there seems to be being portrayed as a possible trade war. Are we really going back with no hesitation to the Cold War era as we are speaking right now?
I think it's really same in a way that there is a confrontation, but it's different.
So is it only rhetorical? Or is it being used as a rhetoric way of defending one's own interests?
I think that what's absent there is the ideological element. It's not Chinese communism or Russian communism against American capitalism. And there is different layers that the war is much more globalized. But the problem here that the vision that Russia and China would integrate into the international system accepting U.S. leadership is a very flawed one as soon as the countries have gained more resources to stand up and say, we probably want to be sovereign and not let anybody impose your will upon us.
Right.
Russia did that in a very brutal and dramatic way, fighting for its sphere of influence in the post-Soviet space.
Two things I have to ask as a result of what you just said. One is whether the U.S. really demonstrating its leadership in the world today for the others to whether to follow or to accept. That's one thing. The other thing is whether you should combine China and Russia together, because these two countries seem to have some very different stages of development, so to speak. So I wonder, how would you respond to my question related to your colleague's answer?
Look at the United States and its allies, and that's where the leadership is, and that's where the leadership will stay. On issues
with
that
which ally, by the way?
Well, European allies.
There seems to be a big spar going on over there about whether to protect their allies in the future anymore.
Well, I don't think we should be that worried about the future of NATO. I think NATO will stay, and I think that when push comes to shove, the allies in the near future and medium-term future are likely to follow the U.S. lead on most important issues. So the United States leadership exists in that part of the world. The United States, however, has lost a position that it's occupied since the end of the Cold War, And that position was the unchallenged leader of the entire world, where China and Russia and so many others looked up to the United States for global leadership. Now this leadership has been challenged by China, primarily in economic terms, but not exclusively in economic terms, in some very direct terms by Russia, in places like Ukraine, places like Syria, and other places. So this situation leads us to a more contentious period in international relations.
What is this role of China-Russia relations in a way? How do you see the potential of that? And what would it mean to, let's just say, the countries like the United States and others who are trying to group these two together?
I think that there is a lot of natural compatibility between the interests in places like Central Asia and just economically, because Russia has a terrible problem with infrastructure. Whoever travels there knows that Russia needs to do a lot. China has tremendous experience. China has abundance of capital to invest. Russia wants to attract that capital. So that doesn't create a lot of contradictions. And I think that Chinese leadership is apprehensive of other sensitivities, particularly when you're talking to great power, a proud great power like Russia. And so far it has worked well in a very good fashion.
Really?
Well,
it's great to see the colleagues debate against one another.
The Russia-China relationship is one of the central pillars of stability across Eurasia, precisely for the reasons that you mentioned. Second, it's a new kind of a great power relationship that is not built on necessarily on an alliance against a third party.
Yes.
I don't think that this is the Sino-Russian rapprochement was about the United States. It was not historically. I'm talking about post-Soviet period.
Yes.
And it's not today. China and Russia are led by, in my view, the relationship is based on the formula: we will never be against each other, but we will not necessarily be with each other all the time, which is a fine combination of reassurance and flexibility. And that, I think, will serve both countries well into the going forward.
How is that likely to go with these two countries, China and Russia as well, given that President Putin has just got this very strong mandate, and Chinese President Xi Jinping as well, unanimous, that's a unanimous vote into the office as the president. So how do you see that is likely to go along the road?
Well, I think that the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is more of a platform than an organization, and I would say a useful platform. That is a platform that has recently expanded to include India and Pakistan, which has turned the SCO into a more complex and complicated organization. At this point, what's more important than multilateral initiatives are the initiatives taken by countries or agreed between countries. And I think that Russian-Chinese collaboration could be extremely useful in promoting stability in Eurasia, promoting prosperity in Eurasia, and in combination with other bilateral relationships, that could serve a very useful purpose of creating a zone of peace and collaboration in continental Asia. That will be extremely difficult to do for a number of reasons. Relations between several countries, including some of the major powers, are not very encouraging, let's put it that way. But that's an absolute must. This is a task that could be resolved eventually using the fine platform of the SCO, but don't oversell it.
I see. Before we go, I do want to ask an important question. Okay, the election has wrapped up. High numbers, we got it. But the question is, what's next? What is going to be the economic plan, if there is any? Do you have any advice? If you are being asked by the Kremlin, by the way. Secondly, what about the future generations of Russian leaders? Are we seeing some ladders already lining up for the future choices or selections?
I would say that on the economy side, Mr. Putin has employed his former finance minister, who he knows for many years, Alexei Kudrin, and there is a blueprint. The question is whether Russia will embark on bold economic structural reforms, which are risky, including some interest groups, or it can muddle through and continue the way it does with some marginal improvements. And I would think that the second scenario is more likely. As for generation, it's not lining up. Mr. Putin is himself very actively and skillfully managing this transition, trying to create a group of around 300, 400, several hundred people whom he rotates between the region and the central government, also using very much the Chinese model of grooming up generations of leaders. And he tries to create an artificial collective successor of whom he would later on pick several people who will be the core of this leader. But that's unprecedented in Russian history, that a monarch, a tsar, though he is called an elected president, is trying to manage this transition and not transition to one person, but to a group and generation of new leaders.
That's a big experiment he's doing right now, according to you.
Absolutely. And I think that will be the major essence of the 6 years. That's where all the effort will be dedicated, resting aside some black swans.
I see.
Well, I would not look for reform with a big capital R in the next several years, although there will be some reforms. Russia's economic problem is not economic as politico-economic. That calls for very significant changes that I think will be undertaken years from now. On the other issue, I think for Mr. Putin, the priority is preparing for the post-Putin leadership. And to him, governance is the most important thing in Russia. It's a make or fail situation. Russia failed twice in its history just because, and basically went down the drain, just because its leadership was too weak. Now, Putin does not want that to be repeated. So he's working very hard on the leadership issue. The issue is whether Putin's plan eventually, and Putin's appointees and nominees and candidates will get the mandate from the Russian people. That's the most important thing that Mr. Putin has learned, and I believe that the new generation will have to operate under those conditions.
A lot of food for thoughts, gentlemen. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your understanding about what is going on in Russia and its relations with some of the most important players in the world. Thank you so much, Dmitry Trenin and also Alexander Gaviev. It's great to have you here, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
Always a pleasure being with you.
You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, and this just in. A South Korean court has issued a warrant to arrest the former President Lee Myung-bak over a series of corruption charges. Follow prosecutors' calls on Monday about 18 counts of corruption, including bribery, embezzlement, breach of trust, and tax evasion, are levied against him. Lee is reportedly charged with receiving tens of millions of US dollars in kickbacks from the country's intelligence agency and big companies, including Samsung. And that is the latest news. And now, stay with us here on World Insight, still to come on our program. The man behind the blockbuster Operation Red Sea, Dante Lam, in a conversation about his beginnings in the industry and the huge efforts for filming a Navy war movie right after this break. You are watching World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. Chinese film fans spent over 10 billion yuan or $1.6 billion US watching movies in February, setting a new record for monthly sales in a single market. The biggest draw was Operation Red Sea, an anti-terrorism film that raked in over $500 million at the box office. It's the third highest grossing Chinese film ever. I sat down recently with Dante Lam, the film director, to learn more about his work. Before the interview, take a look at this.
Directed by Dante Lam, Operation Red Sea is loosely based on the Chinese Navy's March 2015 evacuation operation in Yemen. Set amid militant unrest in a fictional Middle Eastern country, it tells the story of a ship's crew and an assault team as they rescue Chinese citizens and foreign refugees, resolving a potential nuclear crisis along the way. Ying Fang, who played a member of the strike team, believes the quality of the film and the anti-war message it sends strike a chord with the audiences.
It's a quality production, and it resonates with the audience, with their common desire for peace and patriotism.
The film was immediately compared to Wolf Warrior 2, the incredibly successful military action film released last year. In place of the individual heroism seen in Wolf Warrior 2, Operation Red Sea promotes cooperation between a group of soldiers. It also features believable on-scene performances.
Dante Lam is a director that strives for perfection. Every day during filming, he's striving for realism. All the actors are on standby waiting to be filmed. When the actors are on set and don't know what they're doing, the director gives us instructions, since the explosion creates genuine reactions.
Another added layer to the film is that it shows off China's advanced military hardware. The characters also display versatility as they responded to the unexpected during the movie's well-choreographed action set pieces.
在拍完这个戏的时候，没有想象过到现在有这样的反应啊。
After I finished the movie Operation Red Sea, I did not imagine it would be a box office hit. In fact, as a director, a film with a good word of mouth is the most important thing. But of course, the box office is based on its reputation. For me, I am more excited when I hear someone talking about my movies rather than just seeing the box office figures.
票房来说更兴奋。
I know that you work together with the Chinese Navy on the preparation for this, and they helped you throughout the process. What was that cooperation like for you?
跟海军碰面的时候他们就想把那个也门切桥这件事情去还原这个故事。
When I met the Navy, they wanted us to reenact the Yemen evacuation. At that time, I asked them one question: how much support can the Navy offer to embellish the story?
去呈现这个故事。
That's a great question coming from a movie director, I would say.
然后他们就很坚定地说
They responded,
I give you everything.
Wow. That's a great promise.
Yes. 这个我就觉得听完之后，我觉得那我就
When I heard that, I relaxed, realizing I could just focus on the story itself. This is the first time I have dealt with this genre. I went to the military port, stood on our warships, and inspected the most advanced equipment. I got a sense of how advanced China's technology has become.
So they provided you with tanks, and they provided you with the fleets, cargoes, and I also heard some Humvees. So how does that work? I mean, all of these things work together. It's a gigantic project, I would say, for any movie director.
大部分的戏都在外面，所以
Most of the film was shot in Morocco, except for the scene with the warships, which was shot in China. The scenes with the Humvees and the tanks were all shot in Morocco. In fact, the vehicles were all provided by the Moroccan military. Of course, some other equipment was sourced from other places. For example, the troop crawler was from the UK. So this movie brought together the technical power of many different countries.
Joint military efforts, it seems.
Yes, that's my dream.
It is. It's a dream come true, isn't it?
Yeah.
But when you think about that, so many support, logistic support, good for you. Yet at the same time, a lot of pressure for you to make the best out of it.
这个电影是要去到这么远一个地方拍。
The film was shot in such a distant set that I brought in a crew of about 500 people. This type of movie was also a new experience for me. I often worried about how to portray the movie in the proper time period.
能像今天 这个时代的一种电影的感觉。
Can I say you're very brave?
Yeah, I have a brave heart.
I think you do. I think you do. So how?
可能要天天面对很多。
Every day, we encountered many problems, but persistence is key. Never give up.
从不放弃。
In Morocco, in the desert.
Yes.
Sandstorms.
Yes.
All the time.
The weather is so bad. The living everything is condition is very bad. Doesn't matter. We keep going.
You and your cast and the whole crew took a lot of efforts. Some of you even injured, including with the cast. What exactly, at that time you could say, well, go be, let's be strong. But it's easier said than done.
我知道他们每一个人心里面都是有很多不舒服。
I know all the crew wasn't comfortable at that time. Every department and everyone had their problems, and I could not take care of everyone. I just guided them through the steps that had to be completed to accomplish the task. Frankly speaking, there are some people who really could not persevere and quit halfway through filming. But I think the team, especially the actors, most of whom are new, would have sacrificed a golden opportunity if they gave up halfway. So we all bit the bullet, clenched our teeth, and moved on.
佢哋都有一種可以叫非一般演出。
Very good. 好睇。 This is the spirit behind the movie.
At the end of the day, when you wrap it up, did you say anything to the cast?
I'm proud of them.
As simple as that?
The whole crew. Yes, this is so powerful.
And how did they respond to you? I guess they
very
cried.
appreciate.
More movies to come with the cast. The story is a wonderful one because it was based on a real-life incident about how the Chinese Navy helped to take out those people who were trying to get hold of the hostages and bring the hostages back home. It's a very encouraging story, and yet in the movie some say it's all about actions.
本来的故事那个也门真实那个事件就没有去到我们电影现在这种情况啊。
In fact, the Yemen evacuation incident did not occur as it did on screen. However, the Navy had prepared a contingency plan in case of an emergency. So during that time, their special team always stood by. And the movie does not represent the actual evacuation, but rather an evacuation under a worst-case scenario.
他们预估会发生的东西，我就把它呈现出来。
A lot of visual scenes, explosions, flying limbs, blood. Will that bring the box office, or will that demonstrate to people the realities of war? Why would you go really bloody?
其实这个电影啊是一个战争片。
This movie is a war drama. I'm reflecting on the realities of war. War movies are meant to impress the audience. Although the theme of the movie is war, I wanted to express the film as anti-war. Whether you are a soldier with a similar experience or not, it captures a fear they feel when they enter a war zone, a fear that will scare the audience. I hope this war movie, in addition to its commercial success, can invoke a deeper meaning. For me, I do not want war to happen, but sometimes you have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Chinese patriotic movies. Over the past few years, it seems it has already taken on a new face, some say, even with the movie you just produced. For example, earlier there was the Wolf Warrior 2, and there we go with the Operation Mekong and also Operation Red Sea. People say this is a combination of patriotism combined with Hollywood blockbuster production skills. Is that what you're looking at?
你说的那种对我来说是一种正能量的电影。
The movie you describe has a very positive message. As a director, I chose the kind of performance techniques and attitudes that can be used to convey this positive energy to the audience. In fact, both Operation Red Sea and Operation Mekong convey the same message, a sense of mission. Whether you are a soldier, a police officer, or an ordinary person like me, we all have our mission. My mission is to provide the audience with a quality movie.
But some say in the movie, the Chinese guys never die. They're like the Monkey King. They're all powerful. No matter what happens, no matter how strong the terrorists are, they are gonna win.
但是电影是也有一种带有一种
Movies have a heroic romanticism. It's like a belief. As an audience, when you get attached to a protagonist who encounters difficulties and ultimately fails to achieve success, you'll get a sense of dread. However, I hope to show the realities in Operation Red Sea. So I will portray sacrifices. Not everything will be completely perfect. Sometimes sacrifice is inevitable. Indeed, sacrifice is also contagious.
所以在 Operation Red Sea is not a Monkey King.
Well, after all these years, and putting so much into designing the story and the scenes and the production, what are going to touch you? I really wondered.
其实我每一次去想一个故事的时候，重点是有没有一个点是跟你的心是能连上的。其实
Every time I think about a story, I think the key is if the content can touch your heart. I'm filming something that is emotional or worthy of praise because this concept can even touch me. The audience cannot be moved if you yourself cannot be moved. In fact, every time you start a story, the most difficult thing is to find such a concept. Sometimes you can get a writer's block in the search of such a concept only to give up. At this moment, I gravitate towards movies with a more positive tone, because these kinds of movies can inspire many people. Besides making films, there are still a lot of things I have not tried, a lot of things I really want to do. Before I was a director, I wanted to be a chef. I've always been trying to make desserts.
That sounds fun.
I always wanted to learn.
That's very different, of course, from what you do professionally.
因为我们拍电影是一个很高压的一个工作。
Because making movies is so stressful, I like to unwind by quietly cooking something in the kitchen. Sometimes while filming, I cook for the team. When we filmed Operation Mekong, for example, I often asked the group to come to my room to eat. Sometimes I like to talk with the screenwriter about the script while I was cooking. I think this casual approach was more conducive than formal negotiation.
Master chef of both the food and the story. There we go. But before we go, I do want to ask you a little bit about your personal experiences. Starting doing detective stories, police stories, action movies, and then you transform yourself from only the deputy director to the director and now doing war movies. What has this process mean to you? I mean, it seems that Hong Kong embraced John Woo at the very beginning. Everybody's like that, and then move on. And now you become something that's quite impressive all over the world. So how did that happen?
我可以把我自己分成2个阶段。
I think I can divide my experiences into 2 stages. The first one is when I first started as a director. I always wanted to prove that I could do anything, that I am capable. However, during this stage, I did not communicate with my heart. Inevitably, it did not go down very well. So I stopped for 2 years. At that time, I did not need to create anything. So I had time to reflect and ask myself some questions. It was a good experience for me. And after those 2 years, I reworked a lot of ideas. and started pursuing them with my heart. I have been in the second phase ever since.
Anli waited for 8 years. You only 2 years. You're fast. You are fast.
可能从我一开始还没当导演的时候，其实我对
Before I became a director, I was especially impressed with action movies. However, at the beginning of my career, I kept overthinking things. I knew I could grasp the flow of action movies, but maybe I was young and rebellious. I never attempted them. In fact, my action movies back then were not very good. So from the second stage onwards, I chose to do what I liked, what I could grasp. I wanted to do it better. I wanted to master a project before I began a new one.
You want to save the best to have fun, I guess.
Yes. Yes, you're right. A lot of fun. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lam, for being with us. Once again, great congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you.
That's Dante Lam with his movie, Operation Red Sea. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.